Taisho Otomo fairy tale, also known as Taisho Maiden's fairy tale, or as I call it, Taisho Era fairy tale, is, with the possible exception of Over the Moon for You, probably the sweetest, most wholesome anime I've ever watched. This is what I would definitely recommend for people who don't normally watch anime or are looking to get into anime, or that I'd even recommend to just someone who's never seen an anime before. I think this is a show you probably could just pick up and enjoy, if for no other reason than it's a historical period piece and it's a time in history. And I mentioned this during my Demon Slayer review, that you don't really see too many things said in. The Taisho era is an interesting time period spanning from 1912 to 1926, where Japan was emerging from World War II and it was really starting to try to become modern and decide what direction it wanted to go in. Did it want to be a Western liberal democracy? Did it want to go down a more third positionist route? Did they want to stick with a more reactionary approach? It was kind of all over the place, and we really got to see Japan come into its own as an industrial power. And you do see this throughout the movie. It has the TV show, it does kind of remind me a bit of Fall of the Samurai, although obviously Fall of the Samurai took place in the past. Just there's all these new inventions, there's phones and trains and department stores and coal and just kind of all this other stuff that's just rapidly become part of the Japanese people's lives. And I feel like in a lot of cases, the Japanese tried to maintain their traditional aesthetics and kind of incorporate technology into that, to a lesser extent than maybe we kind of had in the West, where we just kind of went full gung ho and modernized everything, including our architecture. Although Japan eventually would go in that direction. But in this time period, it's this very interesting mix of different styles, more so than you even see today. So I think just for that alone, and just kind of looking at these socioeconomic changes that Japan's undergoing, I'd almost recommend it just on that basis. But this show has a lot more to offer besides being a period piece. So Taisho Era Fairy Tale stars our two main characters, Tamahiko and Yuzu, otherwise known as Yuzuki. So Tamahiko is the second son of the very wealthy Shima family. He gets into a car crash, though, which kills his mother and permanently cripples his right hand. Or rather, sorry, the majority of his right arm. Well, he's eventually able to learn how to write with his left hand. It's just never going to be quite the same. His father, in kind of a traditional Japanese style, is disgusted by him, viewing him as a disabled and a cripple, and he exiles him to a family mansion up in Chiba in the mountains, and says, "I'll send you like a supplement for the rest of your life. You'll live in relative comfort, but it's so shameful to have a son with a crippled arm that I'm going to just pretend that you're dead. I'm telling everybody you died in the car crash, and you're just going to have to sit there." It just seems it is a very like cruel thing, but it is a very like intrinsically Japanese thing. In Japanese society, image is everything, often far more important than whatever the actual substance of a situation is. And Japanese society is also collectivist in a way that Western society isn't, wherein people are just expected to kind of sacrifice themselves and their rights and whatever for what's perceived as the greater good. Although their conception of what the greater good is very different from a Western perspective because it's not based on Christianity. But I digress. So he gets banished to this estate where he lives by himself, more or less, and he's just kind of extremely depressed. And he's kind of, I don't know if you want to use the term emo or just downtrodden, or just he constantly like talks about wanting to kill himself and stuff like that. To be honest, though, he has a very good reason for being depressed. He lost use of one of his dominant arm, and he got his father told him that he was literally dead to him, and he pretended to all the dude's relatives that he had died in the car crash. His father also will tell him the couple times they meet throughout the series, "I wish you had been the one to die rather than my wife. You deserved it." And his father blames him for his mother's death. So he's really depressed, particularly for the first half of the series. I don't really mind that though, because like I said, he has a very good reason to be. It's not like he's just some angsty dude who's angsty for the sake of being angsty. He had real tragedy in his life. I'm also going to say it's nice to see a protagonist with a disability. Maybe that sounds a bit like I'm doing affirmative action or something, but there are people who naturally occur in a society through accidents or through birth problems or through illness who do kind of have these issues. And it's nice to see a character who has a disability, but that's just not their sole defining feature. It does impact the rest about them, but it's just kind of an organic part of the story. And it doesn't feel like it's put in there to just kind of fill a quota. Like, we want to have a disabled character. It's integral to his character, but he's more beyond that, and a lot of the story is him kind of coming to terms with his disability and trying to kind of work past it, which I think is a very uplifting and positive message. So, under the rest of the story, we have Tamahiko as the main character. Our other main character is Yuzu or Yuzuki. So, Yuzu is sold to his Tamahiko's father in exchange for a debt. I haven't gone far enough in the series, or the anime hasn't gotten far enough to really talk about how they got into debt. But they were in massive amounts of debt, and the father said, "Look, if you sell me your daughter to be my crippled son's caretaker and future wife, then I'll forgive your debt and I'll take it onto myself." So they agreed to that, and they sold Yuzuki to his father. And so in the first episode, she arrives at his mansion, and he's not really sure what to make of her. Now, Yuzuki or Yuzu is a very pleasant, likable girl. If you look at kind of the image I have on screen now, you might be like, that's a little creepy. So there is a 2 year age gap between them, I believe. Yuzu is 14, or sorry, 3 year age gap. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes with age gaps. So she's 14 at the beginning of the series. Takahiko is 17, and they look like a lot more. Like there's a much larger age difference between the two of them than that. That's because members of the Shima family are all unusually tall. Tamahiko is not 5'9", and Yuzu is a very short woman, so she's 5'7". So they're only about 3 years apart, but it looks like it's substantially more than that. There's more than a foot of height difference between. But anyways, Yuzu is just an extremely sweet girl. She immediately takes to Tamahiko. She was really worried that she was going to be married off to some like really creepy weird guy. Tamahiko's a pretty good looking guy. He's obviously depressed. He's sad. He kind of wants to die. But other than that, and being a little kind of grumpy, he's generally speaking a nice person. And Yuzu's almost immediately like, okay, we can make this work. This isn't that bad. I could have been married to someone way worse. I could have been married to some like snob who's going to mistreat me. This guy seems okay, and I see potential in him. And she very quickly, I think, sees that Tamahiko can improve. He's not living up to his potential. And she's just kind of there as a source of constant support for him. She's just always kind of there for him, encouraging him, trying to push him to be better, but also offering him kind of an unconditional love. And so Yuzu basically just takes over immediately the role of his wife. They don't get married in the first season, but she does all the cooking and cleaning. It's kind of a running joke that she's extremely strong for her size. And as time goes along, Tamahiko starts to thaw out somewhat. His initial reaction to Yuzu is he's kind of just befuddled. I mean, on one hand, he kind of wants to die. On the other hand, he has like a cute, nice girl who loves him. Well, he doesn't believe he's worthy of love, but I mean, you could do way, way, way worse in a arranged marriage than Yuzu. Yuzu is a really nice girl. So he's just not really sure. Eventually, he kind of goes from being just kind of confused to feeling kind of guilty that he basically feels he took her away from her parents. He's using her as his house slave. That he's not worthy of her, and and he eventually kind of decides to do something about it. Now we have his sister who comes in fairly early on in the series, Tomoko, who is 12, but she looks substantially older than that because, once again, she's exceedingly tall. I think she's 5'4" or something like that at the age of 12. That entire family is just kind of, I don't know, maybe they started drinking milk before the rest of the Japanese public did, but they're just very tall. So she's a bit of a tsundere towards Tamahiko, where she's just very goes back and forth between being really mean to him and really kind of nice to him. And a lot of it is just that she feels very awkward with the situation and it's difficult with the situation. And I think she has a lot of trouble making friends with the girls at her school because of her looks, her wealth, and her height and stuff like that. And basically, she's kind of a sourpuss, but she meets up with Yuzu. They become best friends. I mean, they're going to be sisters eventually. And Yuzu really helps to thaw her out and make her feel better. And she eventually, kind of a part of the one of the character arcs of season one, is she decides that she wants to become a doctor to help people and kind of stake out on her own. And she more or less becomes adopted by their uncle because she also hates their father. 'Cause their father's a massive dick. So that stuff happens. Part of the way through the first season, Yuzu makes a bookmark for Tamahiko. I forget what the flower is, but it's apparently symbolizes unchanging love. And there's this local girl who steals his bookmark and his money, and then she tries to get him to take her as his mistress. But he's like, "No, I'm happy with my short waifu, who's literally behaving as my wife. I'm not really interested. I'm just not that kind of dude." And then there's a thing where she tries to pull like a G slur op and tries to like convince Yuzu that he's having an affair. Anyways, a bunch of stuff winds up happening, and Tamahiko winds up tutoring her Rio's little brothers. And eventually it kind of spreads, and it turns out that he is an exceedingly naturally skilled teacher. He spends most of his time reading and kind of studying on his own. So he's very well educated and very thoughtful and very patient. So almost immediately he starts spending his days running kind of an impromptu school with the kids in the village. And once again, it's kind of his rehabilitation process. It's him realizing that he still has something to offer the world, that he still has value despite the fact that he's lost use of his right hand, that he'll never be as like this active, strong, muscular guy, but that he can still contribute to society. He can still be helpful. And more so than that, he decides that it provides him with a way to try to be worthy of Yuzu. Um, Her role is really to make him want to be a better person so that he can be worthy of her, which is, I think, ideally what a wife should be. It should be someone who is your other half who completes you. I don't like the whole thing with opposites attract because I don't think that's true. I think complementary personalities attract. I think someone who's a bit more quiet and thoughtful and slightly melancholic, but is good at looking at the big picture and stuff like that, pairs well with someone who's like a lot more hyper and upbeat and cheerful and kind of lives in the moment. I think because both of them are really nice people. Both of them have a lot of things in common, even if their kind of interests diverge a fair amount. And like I said, one of them is very extroverted, one of them is very introverted. They kind of round out each other's flaws. And I kind of think that's how a healthy relationship works, where you're similar in some ways, not in others, but the ways in which you're different are complementary or neutral. They're not like completely opposed to one another. And I think this show does a really good job of portraying their relationship like that. So as the season goes on, Tamahiko decides to go back to school. A lot of people bully him there. He winds up making a friend, Hakaru, who is the brother of a idol, one of Japan's first idols, who's like a popular singer. We have some fun episodes where Yuzu and her try to write songs together. A lot of this show is very slice of lifey. This is much more of a drama, like a romantic drama, than a comedy, which I kind of like because it's a nice change of pace. Just because a lot of what I've seen lately has been kind of more romantic comedy stuff. A lot of it though is literally just like them hanging around the house, cooking meals together, going to school, going for walks, going to the town to buy stuff. There's an episode I like a lot where they go to Tokyo, and it's Yuzu's first time I think seeing like a department store. And she doesn't, I think, entirely get that Tamahiko, even if he's the pariah of the family, he's still rich. So he buys her a bunch of silk to make kimonos out of, and she's really happy about that. And then that's like a whole thing in the next episode that, like, oh, she has all these cute new kimonos to wear. Like I said, it's a very wholesome show. And then season one ends. The last couple episodes deal with the great Tokyo earthquake, which destroyed Tokyo, and Yuzu happened to be in Tokyo at the time visiting a friend of hers who was pregnant, and all the trains and stuff are down. So Tamahiko walks all the way from Shiba. My geography of the Kanto region isn't the best, but it takes him about 3 days to walk with Rio because her brother works in the city to get there. And then he just spends like he meets up with his sister who's there with their uncle who's a doctor to try to help some of the people who are sick and wounded. Yeah, so he spends a couple days walking there. It's exceedingly difficult. He then just goes through and searches the ruins. Eventually, he manages to come across Yuzu. He gets some people to tie her to him, and he manages to get her out. He runs into his best buddy and the singer girl, and when the end of the season kind of comes together, and it's kind of like the conclusion, at least to the first part of Tamahiko's character arc. He's gone from being like this sad, depressed, pathetic dude who just wants to kill himself to being someone who has a bunch of friends, who has a loving fiance, who he went from having a kind of a mix to a very warm, cordial relationship with his sister to being a respected man in the community and to be back to going somewhere in life, to finish school and probably eventually become a teacher, to kind of be his own man. And it's a very uplifting, pleasant, and happy show. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed it, and I really hope we get a season two of it. I definitely would watch a season two. They could produce any number of seasons. It's kind of like with Over the Moon for You season two, which I'll review at some point. It's like it's more of the same, but if the same is like a cute married couple doing cute married couple stuff, like I'm down for that. I'm down for more like Yuzu, Tamahiko going shopping and stuff like that. There's this like thing that hacks have that, oh, people just want to watch like not necessarily drama because there's drama in this show, but like we're gonna just throw random fights in and random affairs in and random love triangles in, and we don't want people don't want to see a couple in a stable relationship, which is what led to the whole No More Day thing in Spider-Man. But I do, and I like it. Now, for those of you who want to watch this show and don't want spoilers, and I spoiled myself by looking at the wiki, you can end here. Eventually, what winds up happening is Tamahiko's older brother dies, and he becomes the heir to the family because he's the other son. And his father decides to go to people. Look, my son didn't actually die. He's been hiding out. He's been recovering. I need a male heir, and he's the only one I have left. The condition, though, for him becoming the heir to the Shima clan, which is this big, wealthy, uh, wealthy family, is for him to put aside Yuzu and pick a more uh, higher value girl who to marry who will forge a business alliance. And he just goes, "No, I'm sticking with my waifu. I'm gonna marry her. Fuck you, Dad. You're a massive asshole." And his father, I think they play like a game of chicken, and his father winds up disowning him because he thinks that he can't believe that his son would ever not want all the money and wealth and power and stuff, and he would choose his wife over that. What she winds up doing, and then from my understanding, the second half of the show, which maybe we'll get to in season 2 or 3, is they decide to pay off Yuzu's debt. They live in relative poverty, but they're happy because they're free from his father. They're able to start a family together. Like I said, it's very wholesome. It's very wholesome. You have good character arcs in it. Um, it's just an overall excellent show, and I would recommend this show to just about anybody. Whether you like anime or you don't like anime, I think there's definitely a lot here for somebody to enjoy. So, God bless. Definitely give Taisho Era Fairy Tale a try, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.